As Thanksgiving comes up, you naturally think about things you're grateful for, and I'm very grateful for my friend Jill. Last night we went to Vino Colette Winery, because we're doing this A to Z challenge, where we started off with, our rule is restaurants that we have not been to. We got to try a new restaurant, one that we haven't been to, and you got to find one that starts with that letter. And so it's been a lot of fun, although we're on X. Let me tell you, there's literally one restaurant in all of Cincinnati that starts with an X, and it's like 18, but it's in Roman numerals, and it's kind of pricey. So, but that's where we're going next. But it's just really fun. Like, she's the kind of friend. One day on a Friday, she's like, "What should we do tonight?" And I was like, "Well, we haven't been to Iowa yet. We could go to Iowa." And she's like, "Okay, maybe not tonight." So then we planned, just on a Saturday, we just drove to Iowa and had dinner and drove back so that we could check Iowa off the box of places we've been. It's just, for me, to have a friend like that who's willing to go on an adventure and try to get all 50 states and try all these different foods, because some of my other friends would never try different foods and eat Indian and Thai and all these things. It's really great to have a friend like that. And another thing that I love about Jill is she's really good at listening, and then usually politely, kindly, not always saying, "No, that's not right." So I'm the kind of person who starts to look at my present circumstance and get really down in the dumps about it. I'm not a patient person naturally. Don't ever pray for patience. Don't do it. It's a trap. God will put you in a terrible position of waiting, and that's how he builds your patience. So just a warning, a word to the wise, don't ever pray for patience. I did it once and I'm still paying for it. But I'll be thinking about a situation and I'll be like, "Oh, it's not happening. God's forgotten about me. I don't know how to pray. I'm a terrible preacher. I'm a terrible person. What's the point of life?" And I'll get all "God hates me, and is he even real? Am I just delusional thinking that all this God stuff is real, and he doesn't listen to me, and he doesn't answer prayers?" And I'll tell this to Jill, and she'll be like, "Really? Because 2 weeks ago, you said you prayed for this and then it happened. Really? Because just last week you were telling me that you were talking to God, and he told you blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that did happen." And she brings me back to earth. I tend to get focused on the problem, and because she is not emotionally invested in the problem, she has a wider angle view of it, and she will call me out, and she'll say "Well, don't you think this?" or "What do you think about this?" So "Remember just last month you had this whole epiphany about blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I did. You're right." And so it's really good for me to have someone like that who speaks truth into my life. And it's especially good because when you're in the spin cycle, we've been talking about overthinking. When you have that thought and then you start to spiral and you get pulled out in the undertow, you start drowning in the thoughts of, for me in this example, God's forgotten about me and he doesn't answer prayers, and is he even real, and have I been deluded, and how can I teach people about God if I don't even talk to him, and I get all pulled out and I'm drowning in all these thoughts, all this overthinking. And my friend Jill will come out in her little rowboat and pick me up and be like, "Come on now, let's get your feet back on solid ground, because that's not true." And she'll speak truth over me. And it's really good to have someone like that. And so it's good to remember the goodness that God has done for us. One of the things when I was reading that book about overthinking, Get Out of Your Head, she has 7 things you can do. Once you recognize that the spin cycle has started, then you say, "Wait a minute, I have a choice." There are 7 things you can do to kind of get back to land, if you will. And one of them is gratitude. And I think about, here we go back to this, you guys are gonna have this verse memorized because I do it every week. This Philippians 4 verse. Now the last couple weeks I have started on 6 or 7, but let me show you, it actually starts sooner than what I have been showing you. Paul is talking about things are tough, I know. He's like, "I get it, things are hard." He's like, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all, because the Lord is near." He's saying, "Oh, you're in the pit? I get it. I've been in the pit. Let me show you how to get out of the pit." He says, it starts by rejoicing. It starts by saying, "God, you're good. Even though my circumstances don't demonstrate your goodness in this moment, even though my circumstances seem horrible and terrible in this moment, I'm still going to say you're good, because that's what faith is like." And he says, "Don't be anxious." This is where we've been the last couple of weeks. Don't be anxious. Don't let don't let those overwhelming thoughts cause you to be anxious. Don't let them pull you out to sea. But in every situation, with prayer, supplication, thanksgiving. Oh, Thanksgiving's coming up this week. Let your requests be made known to God. And then the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Jesus Christ. Peace when you rejoice, when you take your problems to God, when you thank him for the things he has done already for you, when you remember the goodness that he has already done for you, that helps you get your mind off my present problem. And then he releases peace over you. He says, finally, brothers, sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. He's telling them, stop dwelling on your problem. Stop dwelling on the terrible thing that's going on in your life. Stop focusing and living on that. Find the good stuff to think about. Redirect your mind to the good stuff. Think about the good time. Think about the times God has come through for you. Think about the support system you do have. Think about the blessings you do have. Think about the good things that happen in your day. Focus on that. Don't allow yourself to focus on the bad. He says, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me, put that into practice, and the God of peace. We worship a God of peace. And so what does it start with? I'm getting pulled out, and I say, hold on, God is good. I'm in this bad situation, but God is good. Even when it doesn't look like it right now, God is good, and I'm going to be thankful. And I know some of you might be thinking, the guy who wrote this, his name is Paul. Some of you might be thinking, but Stephanie, Paul does not understand what I'm going through. Paul had Jesus. His life was probably fine. Well, let me tell you, Paul's life was not fine. In fact, I'd hazard a guess that if even half of what happened to Paul happened to us, we would have gone running for the hills. A little background on Paul. Paul was a Roman citizen, so he was probably a person of some wealth. He was a Pharisee, which means he was like a religious spiritual leader. He was schooled. He went to the best schools, had the best teachers. This is like a private school kid who went to Harvard. Okay, that's who Paul was. And Paul was so anti-Jesus that when they martyred, meaning they killed the first disciple, Paul held everybody's coats. He was standing there watching it happen, and he held everyone's coats while they stoned Stephen to death. Stephen was the first of Jesus' disciples to be killed. And then Paul joined the merry band of Pharisees, hunting down Christians and trying to kill them and imprison them. That's who he was when he was Saul. And then one day he's on the road to Damascus, and he's riding this donkey, and this super bright light shines and blinds him. And it's the voice of Jesus, and Jesus is like, Paul, what are you doing? Why are you persecuting me? I'm the one you've been waiting for. All this time you've been waiting for the Messiah. You found him. Why are you trying to kill all of his people? Stop it. And Paul was converted in that moment. And then he spent some years studying with the disciples and learning about Jesus. And then he started planting churches. He went on 3 different mission trips around the Italy, Greece, Egypt, that area of the world. He went and he planted churches. And a lot of the letters in the Bible, this after the Gospels that you read, are written by Paul, because he was planting churches and sending them letters. So he became Jesus' number one cheerleader after he was converted. That sounds great. But remember, he had been a Roman and a Pharisee. And those Pharisees, no one else got converted. And so they were still trying to hunt down people who followed Jesus. So they thought he was a traitor. Wait a minute, you're the guy who held the coats while we killed Stephen. Why are you now on their team? Traitor. And so as you look through the book of Acts, and even through some of his letters, a lot of really bad stuff happened to Paul as he was trying to spread the gospel of Jesus. Here's he wrote this letter to the Philippians. When he wrote this letter, he was in prison. He says, now I want you to know, my brothers and sisters, that what's happened to me has served to advance the gospel. He says, as a result, it's been clear throughout this whole palace guard and everyone else that I am in chains. He was in chains. He was a prisoner. And he's writing this letter that says, don't worry. This letter says it's going to be like, focus on Jesus. This letter says, rejoice, focus on the good. He's writing that letter from prison, in chains. So here's some of the things that happened to Paul during his ministry. A bunch of people wanted to kill him. And so they had to put him in a basket and lower him down the wall of the city out because there's like a mob of people. I'm thinking like pitchforks and like stuff like that waiting to kill him. So they had to lower him down the wall in a basket so he could sneak out. The Jewish leaders who had been his friends were constantly saying what a jerk he was and how he's an idiot. And so they're constantly maligning him. They'd spit in his face. They tried to stone him. Stoning means they take rocks and they throw them at you and beat you with rocks until you die. Okay, they tried to stone him in Iconium. They did stone him and leave him for dead in Lystra. He and Silas got beaten to a pulp in Philippi. This letter is written to the people of Philippi. Philippians are the people who lived in Philippi. So while he was in Philippi starting his church, he got jumped, he and his friend Silas, and they got beaten and left for dead. He was forcibly removed from Thessalonica and Berea. He was again beaten nearly to death in Jerusalem. The high priest was talking to him one day and getting mad at him and punched him in the face. The Pharisees repeatedly tried to have him imprisoned, and eventually they did succeed. He eventually was imprisoned by Roman soldiers. This is I don't know why I love the story, but I think it's kind of funny. There's this story where this group of Pharisees and like religious people were like, we will not eat until he's dead. We're going to murder him. And they had this whole, because he was in prison here and they were going to transport him to another city to be tried. And they're like, we're going to jump him. We're going to jump the party on the way when they're transporting him and we're going to kill him. Well, they got wind of it and they moved him early. And so they never got to kill him. And so I always wonder, like, did those people starve to death? Or did they finally, like, rescind their vow? But, this is how badly they wanted him dead. And then once he was in prison, they were shipping him off to somewhere else. And they were doing it towards winter. And he's like, guys, we should not get in this boat. It's not going to go well. And they're like, yeah, the ship captain's like, it'll be fine. He's like, no, I'm telling you, it's not going to be fine. So they get in, and then a storm comes up, just as Paul said it would. And they're about to die. And the guards are like, let's just throw all the prisoners over. Let's throw all the ballast over, including all the prisoners. We'll just throw them into the sea, so maybe we'll survive. Well, Paul got a word from God that says, I tell you what, the ship is going to be destroyed, but the people won't, if you don't throw us overboard. And so they didn't. The people lived. The ship was wrecked. This is the island of Malta. So they had to spend the winter on the island of Malta. When they first get there, the ship is dashed to pieces and they're all crawling out of the water, soaking wet, freezing cold because it's coming on winter. They're trying to build a fire, and when they build the fire, the poisonous snake comes out and bites him in the hand, but he doesn't die. So I look at this list. I mean, that's 3 slides. I imagine if any one of us went through even 1 or 2 of those things on that list, we've been like, this following Jesus thing is too hard, I'm out. Beaten, stoned, spit in his face, imprisoned. Paul did all of that, and he still never rescinded that Jesus was the Lord. He's still saying, after he went through all of that, he has already gone through all of that when he writes to his people, rejoice. Slide in the wrong place. Rejoice. I've been beaten, I've been stoned, I've been punched, I've been left for dead, I've been maligned, and still I say, rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Not just once. He says it twice for those who were sleeping, not paying attention. Rejoice. And let your gentleness be evident to all. That means we don't take revenge. That means we don't go around complaining to everybody who will listen about how terrible our lives are. Let your gentleness be known, because God is near you. The antidote to anxiety, the antidote to woe is me, the overthinking, that I'm drowning in my thoughts, is gratitude. Science has found this. Science studies have shown that anxiety and gratitude cannot coexist in your mind at the same time. So if you're feeling anxious, start rejoicing. Focus on what is lovely and good. Focus on whatever is true and noble and right and pure and lovely and admirable. You're drowning in the anger, you're drowning in frustration, you're drowning in, I don't know if God even loves me anymore. You're drowning in whatever your circumstances are. The lifeboat for you is gratitude. The lifeboat is to rejoice in the Lord and believe in Him even when our circumstances don't show it. And so we need to find tangible ways. We need to have rhythms of gratitude. We need to have a way that we do it regularly. Like I was in an interview with a woman who was interviewing for our assistant principal job. You could not pay me enough to be an assistant principal. Their job is terrible. They have to deal with all the kids who are being bad. They have to field calls from all the mad parents. Like, to me, that's all the bad that has to do with being a teacher and education and none of the good. And she was in a similar job at the time, and one of the questions in the interview was like, how do you keep your mental health good when you're doing this hard job? And she said, every day before I leave, I write down 3 good things from the day. Before I allow myself to go home and take all that ick with me, I made sure that I write down 3 good things that happened in the day. And I just thought, that is brilliant. Because as a teacher, and I'm sure in any of your jobs too, when you go home, all the frustrations of the day, you see your friend, your spouse, your dog, whatever, and you're like, bah! And so for her, she didn't want to take all that ick home. She understood, and she never talked about, I don't know if she has faith or not, but she never talked about that because it was a school interview. She understood the power of gratitude. And so we need to have a rhythm like that. Maybe you have a gratitude journal. Maybe every day you write 5 things in it that you're grateful for. Maybe you have, for those of you tech-savvy people, maybe you keep a list in your phone of all the things you're grateful for. I keep a little jar that every time God answers a prayer, I write it on a little slip of paper and I put it in that jar. So when I'm thinking, like I started my story with, oh my gosh, God doesn't answer prayers, He doesn't listen to me, then I can pull out that jar and remind myself of all the times God did listen and all the times God did answer a prayer. Because every one of us walked in here on our own 2 feet, which means every one of us is ambulatory. Every one of you is listening to me with ears that can hear. Every one of you can see me with eyes that see. We all have something to be grateful for. Like every day I eat, I thank God that I'm eating, because there are people in this world who don't eat that much. They are starving. Every day when I walk to work, I thank God for making me healthy, whole, and beautiful, and bringing me to this town, this awesome, beautiful little town to live and to work. We have things that we can be grateful for. That's what we need to focus on when we're drowning in the ick. When you are overthinking, when you are stuck and drowning in anger, frustration, feeling lonely, feeling despondent, feeling like everything's falling apart, gratitude is the answer. Rejoice always and focus on whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable. And when you do these things, I think I put the last verse in there. Nope, I didn't. Then peace comes to you. The God of peace brings you answers. Peace comes to you when you focus on God and when you rejoice in God. So this week, I dare you. It's the perfect week for this. Actually, I scheduled it for this week because I was like, oh, it's Thanksgiving. Oh, I know. This will be a perfect mesh of my series and Thanksgiving. This week, I dare you to create, if you don't already have, some tangible thing that you can look at. Because when you're drowning, trying to come up with a list is hard. But if you already have a list written out, it's easy to read the list you already have. So make a gratitude list, a journal, maybe even a piece of art, some sort of answered prayer jar, some physical, tangible thing that when it feels like life is falling apart, you can look at. That you can remind yourself of the good stuff that God has done for you and has given you in your life. Ask God to help you break out of that spin cycle of overthinking. Ask him ahead of time to help you stop before you even get to the point where you're drowning because the undertow has pulled you out. Read Philippians 4, all of it. It's only 4 chapters. It's not very long. Read all of it. Paul's talking about how he's in prison and how it's been good that he's in prison. He is celebrating the fact that he's in prison. And he ends it, that therefore, finally, that's like one of the last paragraphs before he says, say hi to all my friends. He ends with, think about all that's good. And to engage, this isn't easy, I'm giving you a softball. Practice gratitude with others this week. So as you're getting together for Thanksgiving, talk about the things you're grateful for. Get people to talk about, maybe on the Thanksgiving table, everybody writes down, you make a little jar of things people are grateful for. Maybe those of you who have kids, maybe you make little feathers and a little turkey and they put what they're grateful for as feathers and you stick them in the little turkey or something. I don't know. Find a way to practice gratitude with others this week. And all of God's children said, Amen. If you have not